Mr. President, thank you for your time. It is Wednesday, October the 18th, 2017. My name is David Sullivan Nesbitt. I am the creator and co-founder of a social media platform called Where is My Canada? I'm sending you this video message from Whitehorse, Yukon. Last night, I sent an urgent message to the United States government alerting them to the threat to your homeland. I would like to take this opportunity to read you this message. I would first like to point out that the Illuminati are very evil. Their evil has multiple levels of malevolence. Within each act, we must always look for a minimum 3 outcomes of desired pain and destruction from them. Last year, in May of 2016, Canada faced a great tragedy. I call it the Great Water Apocalypse. It turned the country, with the world's largest water supply, into a desert. The manufacture of clones in Canada provided a base to destroy America and bring it to its knees. This country, sir, I have traveled around over the last month and a half. There are 35 million Canadians who no longer live in their homes. They have fled. It is an exodus of biblical proportions. The supply of vital oil and gas, water, lumber, and other resources under the current Nazi regime that exists in Canada would cease. America faces a terrific challenge. In other regards, the collapse of the Canadian economy, America's largest trading partner, would lead to recession. Such a recession would be magnified through immediate supply chain disruptions between our borders. Canadian bonds and stocks are now worthless, significantly hurting America's financial standing. Those aspects are the least painful impacts of the Great Water Apocalypse of May of 2016 in Canada. 9/11 itself achieved many levels of malevolence. I won't discuss them with you, the most obvious of which are known. However, there's one that has not been reported and has slipped under the radar, which indeed poses the greatest threat to your homeland. White Canadians like me pass through your borders by the thousands daily. I talk like you, sir. I dress like you. I act like you. I speak like you. I worked in New York City for several months, and each time I traveled from Toronto to New York, not a single eyebrow was raised. The Illuminati have thus diverted your attention geographically around the world, away from Canada and away from people who look like me or talk like me. They have directed you towards Russia, Syria, North Korea, Iran, Iraq, Mexico, among other nations. They diverted your attention physically as well. They trained, or more accurately deceived, American people towards looking for those with less than white skin like me. They trained you, and through the mass media, misled you and deceived you into focusing on people with burqas, those with dark hair, those with beards, those with head garbs, those with imperfect English and foreign accents, mainly from the Middle East, mainly with Muslim origin. This was the greatest deception of your nation. The Illuminati, sir, with due respect, are mocking you and laughing at your perceived gullibility. The biggest risk to your homeland, comes from Canada and Canadians. Not human Canadians, but cloned Canadians and Illuminati sympathizers. Canada is being used, Mr. President, as a launching pad to send highly violent clone police into American cities, preparing for a day of insurrection. Canadian clones are transporting materials, including those nuclear-related, to cause chaos, divisiveness, and physical destruction. Canadian soil, particularly in the north, is being prepared to launch offensive weapons into America. Weapons of mass destruction of all varieties are being readied and are well along in their development and deployment. The range of possibilities is great. The action will be precise and swift. If you recall, 9/11 was over before the first aircraft left the ground. America will be crippled into feeble reaction they plan. I wish to inform you that there is an outstanding speech anomaly in my life that heretofore remains unexplained. I believe your intelligence personnel is very familiar with me and with Where's My Canada and with what a speech anomaly is. It is very common with people who have post-traumatic stress disorder to be very aware of their environment and pick up signals and clues and see similarities and patterns. With me, since I was a child, I have developed an ability to mark certain things among people's speech or tone or context that are irregular. There's a person in the Canadian Intelligence Service, I believe, with whom I've had this specific discussion. The speech anomaly that I'm talking about that applies to the United States centers around Los Angeles. There are two reference points to this one phenomenon, something I've experienced with the speech anomaly itself. It is highly important because the two reference points are years apart, and the originating reference points, I assure, are completely unrelated. I have never had a speech anomaly in my life that has had two separate originating points confirming the same topic. On the day of 9/11, sir, the moment the first tower fell, before any commentary, I immediately thought someone bombed that building. By late afternoon, after waiting for several hours for another bombing where none appeared, I sensed a void. Something was short-circuited in the plans for that day. There was something missing. I have never lost the thought that 9/11 was lopsided. There was supposed to be something occur in Chicago, San Francisco, or Los Angeles. The Illuminati, Mr. President, remember, never relent. They never give up. They never change strategy. Despite overwhelming evidence that they are cannibalizing themselves or even committing suicide, they refuse to alter course. Indeed, they are incapable of recognizing any weakness in themselves. Their inherent nihilism precludes this. They are plotting something for Los Angeles, sir, possibly involving the port of Santa Monica. This would involve trade disruptions, grain possibly, and its main inflection point would be towards America, but also China. The second origin of this Los Angeles speech anomaly, besides 9/11, as I mentioned, involves a childhood teacher I had when I was very, very young. The two are unrelated. The teacher I had, sir, was coincidentally from England. I do not believe in coincidences. Jesus has a plan. Everything fits into a preordained divine plan for the world and for our humanity. I referred to my friend in one letter that I sent to former Canadian Prime Minister P.M. Harper. When I was young, possibly 8 or 10 years old, this was the first occurrence with this woman. Specifically, her pronunciation of Los Angeles was unique. To this day, I have never heard anyone speak it this way. She referred to the city of Los Angeles, emphasizing the last syllable, not spoken as we say it, as it sounding is. Her pronunciation was ease. She pronounced Los Angeles as Los Angeles. When I was 8 or 9 at that time, it struck me as very odd. It struck me as peculiar, and my brain put a marker on it and said, remember this. This is important. There's something about this that has value. I wondered why she pronounced it, but over time, I didn't have any other information that could give me the reason why it was important and why I was supposed to note it. In the Toronto internment camp, each time I mentioned nuclear weapons, or in a blog, in speaking on the street, there was immediate reaction from the Illuminati. They are ballistic whenever I mention Los Angeles. It's a sore point for them. I found over time, Mr. President, that every time something is said that touches them, there is an automatic knee-jerk reaction. Even if it mocks them, even if it shows weakness, they can't help themselves. Every single time I mention nuclear weapons, there's a reaction. Every time I mention Los Angeles, there's a reaction. I'm not saying both are related in this case. What I'm saying is that there is something with the Illuminati in the future that involves nuclear weapons in America. There is also something with the Illuminati that involves Los Angeles in America. Something is going to happen. I don't know exactly what. Either something has happened or something is already underway. What I am saying to you, sir, is that Los Angeles faces elevated risk. When I Googled recently, I wrote actually this past weekend to Alaska Governor Bill Walker. The reason is Alaska itself faces elevated risk. Alaska shares many common characteristics with the Yukon Territory, and specifically involving the use of minerals, oil and gas, and indigenous peoples. Indeed, I've mentioned this several times before, the secret police in Canada, led by former Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, have committed genocide. They have murdered over 100,000 Canadian women of First Nations origin. This has occurred in death camps littered throughout the country, of which I've uploaded ample evidence on YouTube and through documentation. Alaska faces either it has already undergone challenge from the Illuminati or it's on their list, for the similar reasons that Canada's North and Canada's Indigenous population has already been victimized. I would like to emphasize that between the Alaska and Canadian border, specifically through the Alaska Highway, there is also extensive cross-border trade and cross-border shopping and travel by Americans and Canadians both. I'd like to specifically note that the clones that exist in Canada that have been manufactured here are mules. They're passing into the U.S. border, both from Alaska and from the continental United States, and transporting either materials or information. Some of them are coming back, but not all. Some of them are going down and staying there preparing for a day of insurrection, a day of action. Their plan is to cripple America, rob it of its economy, and return it to a colonial status. The grand plan for America is to eliminate 80% of the population and turn the United States into one giant manufacturing internment camp. The desire is to seek revenge and return America to its colonial status before the Tea Party and before it gained independence from Britain. These plans, these actions are well underway. Canada, sir, is being used as a launch pad to weaken and cripple America. The Great Water Apocalypse had the benefit, as I said, their evil has multiple levels of malevolence. The Great Water Apocalypse had the benefit of turning a nation with the greatest supply of fresh water into a desert overnight. In similar sadistic fashion, they unleashed the Fukushima disaster on the Japanese to force them to relive the horrors of nuclear weapons a second time. The ultimate goal, then, of the water apocalypse was not just to cripple Canada or evoke misery. It was a backdoor way because Canadians look like Americans and speak like them, and no one would ever suspect a threat from Canada towards America. The ultimate desire of the Great Water Apocalypse was to prepare for the final act of weakening the United States and crippling it and bringing it fully to its knees. I'd like to mention that on behalf of my fellow Canadians, Mr. President, I have traveled from Toronto. I left on August 29th. The police in Canada are so highly violent that I was physically assaulted 4 times in the 3 weeks before I finally left. I had to flee Toronto for my life. I have traveled through Northern Ontario, west through Winnipeg, Regina, Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, through Northern BC, and finally to Whitehorse. All through my travels, sir, I saw evidence, without a doubt in my mind, that 35 million Canadians fled. There was no sign of violence, very little sign of vandalism. It was a very unusual event. If you compare it to the Katrina hurricane, there's always a certain percentage of the population that stays behind. In this case, no one stayed. The threat was so gigantic, everyone left. Canadian cities are deserted. They are being occupied by clones to create the illusion that nothing has changed. It's a gigantic lie. It's a gigantic deception. All through Canadian cities, I felt and heard the cries of my fellow Canadian brothers and sisters for help. I believe there is a strong likelihood that they are living in the far north, around the Arctic Circle and even further north. They are in desperate need of help. They're alone. They are short of resources. They are afraid. They have fled for their lives, sir, because clones were going to destroy them and murder them. There are extensive cloning operations going on throughout Canada, and there's extensive pedophilia and bestiality going on, led by the clones. Children are at great risk. The risk as well is to America that American children are being transported back and forth through the Alaskan border and through the mainland border to fuel this cloning operation. It is well underway. For me personally, I am facing great risk. The RCMP here are starving and freezing me to death. The Toronto police stole all of my clothing. The RCMP stole $500. I have nothing to eat. I have little money. I have spent the last 11 nights in an ATM vestibule freezing. I am being slowly murdered. I share a great pain, a great loss, and a great tragedy with my fellow Canadian brothers and sisters. I am asking you, and indeed I am asking for the world to help us. My Canadian friends are in serious trouble. I feel very greatly for them. I feel their pain. I feel their despondency and sadness and despair. And I'm reaching out to the United States, Canada's greatest friend and ally, for help. The United States, sir, I'd like to say, faces elevated risk. Most recently, I have attended church service in Whitehorse where the Illuminati are following a satanic practice. Their ultimate goal is to force the entire world to give up all religions and worship Satan. I can cite the example in just last Sunday's church service in the Catholic Church here, the Eucharist was removed. The body of Christ was given, but the blood of Christ was removed. There are ample instances throughout Canada with priests and ministers who have been forced to change doctrine of the gospel of Christ. There is a satanic goal in mind. Every Jew, every Muslim, every Christian faces a direct threat to their religion. If everyone does not abandon their beliefs and pursue a satanic following, they will be executed. Like I am being currently murdered, their fate is the same. Whereas My Canada is sending the United States a warning. Proceed on the current path, and I am your fate. I'd like to say, sir, that I attended St. Patrick's Cathedral in downtown Toronto a couple of months ago. I was in a despondent mood, and Jesus spoke to me. I will tell you exactly what Jesus Christ said about the Illuminati and the clones, and I wish you to use this as your guidance going forward. Jesus said to me, just ignore them, they're garbage. I am asking for the United States. I believe, sir, that divine providence is with your nation. I believe that Jesus has given your nation the immense power, both militarily and financially, that it has for this precise moment. Remember, it was only 2018 years ago when Jesus made his first appearance on earth. It has been less than one generation where the Illuminati and this cloning operation has gotten off the ground before Jesus has come back to Earth to end it. I am advising you that the United States is being watched and is being urged by Jesus to take action. Humanity is facing a gigantic risk, a gigantic threat. If the Illuminati continue on their current path, we will all be murdered. I ask all nations around the world to cease all friction, all wartime activity, all adversarial conflict, and unite as one. I am asking for all nations to unite in solidarity all military resources against our one common foe. The Illuminati hate human life. Their goal is to eliminate the majority of the population. We have never faced such a common threat as all nations do now. I am asking, sir, the United States to lead this move. I would like to end and invite you one day. I hope you have the joy and pleasure of coming to beautiful Whitehorse. There is a river right beside here that runs through a canyon that I believe, sir, has the breath of God flowing through it. When you come to Whitehorse, it's absolutely beautiful. I've never seen anything like this in the world. Within 48 hours, you will believe that Jesus is here. It just has the most spiritual, serene feeling of any place on earth. I'd like to end this and wish you and your nation and your family much good health and prosperity in the years to come. I do have some good news. 2 pieces, actually. Where's My Canada would like to announce that the nuclear clock has been set back. It is now, sir, 11:30.